Imagine the repercussions if the world's most celebrated basketball icon simply vanished. Michael Jordan, the very man who commanded global attention with his games, disappeared without a single explanation. Not to his wife, not to his children, not to the press that had dogged him for decades. For an entire 6 weeks, the billionaire vanished, as if he'd never existed. His family awoke to find him gone. Where had the man who secured 6 NBA championships vanished? What could compel such a powerful figure to abandon everything in secret? When Michael Jordan finally reappeared at the Chicago airport, the world was unprepared for the spectacle that unfolded. He was transformed, leaner, tanned, tears welling in his eyes. And then, before a global audience, he uttered words that defied expectation. "I've discovered that true greatness lies not in the titles we win, but in the lives we touch." But where precisely had Michael Jordan been? And why would a man who possessed it all choose a life subsisting on less than $2 a day? Prepare to unravel the enigma that irrevocably altered the trajectory of the greatest athlete of all time. The biting Chicago wind whipped against the windows of the Jordan brand's 52nd floor office, creating an eerie sound that echoed through Michael Jeffrey Jordan's opulent suite. At 62, the man who once sent the United Center into deafening roars now found himself in a hushed realm of Italian leather, polished marble, and golden trophies that captured the winter sun's light. 6 NBA trophies gleamed like sentinels along the West Wall, each narrating a saga of glory, sweat, and tears that defined an era. Michael adjusted his Cartier reading glasses, his long, still nimble fingers flipping through a $50 million sponsorship contract with a Swiss watchmaker. Even after decades away from the court, his presence still commanded absolute respect in the business world, each calculated move reflecting the precision that had made him a legend. The city of Chicago stretched out endlessly through the panoramic windows, a sea of concrete and steel that he had conquered long before becoming a corporate empire. Just another day, another million-dollar decision, he mused, unaware that his life was about to take a completely unforeseen turn. The latest generation iPhone on the massive mahogany desk vibrated insistently, the name Amara flashing in white letters against a black backdrop. A genuine smile spread across Michael's face, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening with genuine affection. Amara had been more than a nanny to his family for 12 crucial years. She was the second mother his children, Marcus, Jeffrey, and Jasmine, had known, a constant and loving presence in their $15 million Highland Park mansion. Her infectious laughter echoed through the house during summer vacations. Her African stories captivated the children before bedtime, and her quiet wisdom had guided the family through challenging moments when fame and pressure threatened to shatter their domestic tranquility. She was a woman of 5 feet 5 inches, with skin the color of polished ebony, brown eyes that sparkled with intelligence and kindness, and hands hardened by a life dedicated to caring for others. "Amara, how are you, my dear? It's been too long," Michael said, answering the call, leaning back in his presidential armchair while tucking the contract into a drawer. A raspy, fractured voice carried across an unstable international line, riddled with static and interference, sounded like a distant echo from the heart of Africa. The sound was almost unrecognizable. Where once resided Amara's melodic, confident voice, now lay raw desperation and pain, piercing the thousands of miles of ocean separating them. Michael straightened in his chair, every muscle taut, a familiar premonition of something amiss gripping him, like the old days on the court. Decades of competition and leadership had honed his instincts, instantly telling him this wasn't a casual social call. "Mr. Jordan, I need your help." Amara's voice trembled violently, choked by unshed tears. "It's my mother, Mama Ngozi. She's dying, and I don't know what to do." The words fragmented, like shards of glass slicing through the frigid Chicago office air. Contracts clattered to the table, their significance lost in the face of the woman who had nurtured his family with such unwavering love and devotion. For all those years, Amara had been the emotional bedrock of the Jordan family, the comforter in crisis, the problem solver when all seemed lost. the unsung architect of order even during the most intense playoffs. To see, or rather hear, her utterly broken sent a jolt through him, activating all his protective instincts, honed both on the court and as a father. He rose from his chair and walked to the window, observing the tiny figures moving along the icy sidewalks of Michigan Avenue, each burdened by their own unseen burdens. Amara, breathe with me, slowly. Tell me exactly what's happening with Mom Ngozi, he said, his voice steady yet gentle, the same voice he used to soothe his children during nightmares. She's 78 and developed a severe lung infection a week ago, Amara explained, her sobs echoing through the phone like waves crashing against rocks. The public hospitals here in Lagos are overcrowded. There are no medications, no beds. Jordan, she was wasting away before my eyes, and I felt utterly powerless. Michael's heart constricted at the despair in Amara's voice. He rose from his chair and walked to the wall of trophies, lightly touching the 1991 NBA championship trophy, recalling the invincible feeling it evoked. Now confronted with human fragility, all those accolades seemed insignificant. The reality of the situation coalesced in Michael's mind like a storm gathering on the horizon. He knew Mama Ngozi through Amara's stories and the occasional video calls during holidays. A small but formidable woman who had raised 7 children alone in Lagos after losing her husband in a workplace accident. She was the quintessential African matriarch, commanding absolute respect from the entire extended family. A woman who spoke in Yoruba proverbs and whose laughter could illuminate any space, even through a computer screen. To learn that this force of nature was fading in an overcrowded hospital without adequate care shattered something within Michael, a pain he hadn't felt since his own father's demise. Amara, what kind of treatment does she need? What's the cost? He asked, already mentally calculating the number of zeros needed to append to a check. Mr. Jordan, it's more complex than that, Amara replied, her voice now more controlled but still choked with emotion. Here in Lagos, if you have money, you can get immediate private treatment. But since returning to care for the family 3 years ago, I barely managed to pay rent and food. The revelation struck Michael like a physical blow to the gut. For all those years, he had assumed Amara was well off financially, that her U.S. savings would comfortably sustain her in Nigeria. The truth was far harsher than he had ever imagined. Amara's words cut through Michael like a sharp blade, exposing a reality he had never fully considered. For the 12 years she worked for his family, Amara had sent practically her entire salary to Lagos, supporting not only Mama Ngozi, but a complex network of siblings, nieces, nephews, and neighbors who depended on her generosity. When she finally decided to return to Nigeria 3 years prior, it was to personally care for Mama Ngozi, who was beginning to show the frailties of age. Michael vividly recalled the airport farewell at O'Hare, Amara embracing each member of the Jordan family with tears in her eyes, promising to stay in touch and visit whenever possible. What he didn't know was that, without the stable, generous salary she'd enjoyed in the United States, Amara had sunk into a financial predicament she was too proud to share. I work when I can, cleaning houses, babysitting. But the wages here are pathetic, she continued, each word imbued with a shame Michael could feel across the ocean. Mama Ngozi always told me to be strong, never to ask for help, but, Mr. Jordan, I can't let her die when I know treatment is available. A wave of emotion washed over Michael. Amara's dignity, even in her desperation, was something that had always impressed him. She had waited until the very last possible moment before seeking help, battling impossible circumstances alone. Amara, you are never, ever a burden to me or my family, Michael said, his voice trembling with genuine emotion. You've cared for my children as if they were your own flesh and blood. Michael paced the Italian marble floor of his office, his steps echoing as his strategist mind whirred into overdrive. This wasn't just a matter of writing a check, though he was absolutely prepared to do so without a moment's hesitation. There was something deeper at play here, a call he couldn't ignore. Amara wasn't just a former employee seeking assistance. She was family in the truest sense of the word. Her children called her Aunt Amara and still spoke of her with fondness and longing. She had been present at every significant birthday, every graduation, every personal victory and defeat of the Jordan family for over a decade. The thought of her suffering in silence on the other side of the world, too proud to ask for help until the situation became desperate, made Michael feel as though he had failed as a human being. "Amara, listen carefully," he said, stopping at the window and watching a Boeing 737 slice through the gray sky towards O'Hare. "First, I'm transferring money immediately to cover all of Mama Ngozi's treatment at the best private hospital in Lagos. Second, I'll arrange an account for your personal expenses." Amara remained silent for a few seconds, and Michael could hear her ragged breathing through the line. He knew she was struggling with pride and need, gratitude and the shame of needing help. "But Mr. Jordan, I can't accept so much." Amara began to protest, but he gently interrupted her. "It's not a matter of accepting or not. It's a matter of family taking care of family." Even as he spoke, an idea began to coalesce in Michael's mind. An idea so radical and unforeseen that he initially tried to dismiss it as a momentary impulse. Yet the more he considered it, the more it gained traction and clarity. Why merely send money when he could do so much more? Why address the problem from afar when he could be there in person? This woman had dedicated 12 years of her life to his family, had sacrificed time with her own mother to care for his children. The very least he could do was be present during her most trying time. "Amara, beyond the money, I'd like to do something more," he said, his voice imbued with that ironclad resolve everyone in Chicago knew so well. "I want to come there. I want to experience Lagos. I want to be with you and Mama Ngozi during this difficult period." The silence on the other end of the line was so prolonged that Michael thought the connection had dropped. He could imagine Amara processing what she had just heard, trying to fathom how the most famous man in global basketball wanted to travel to one of Africa's most tumultuous cities. When Amara finally spoke, her voice was tinged with disbelief and apprehension. "Mr. Jordan, you don't understand. Lagos isn't Chicago. It's chaotic. It's perilous in certain areas. It's unlike anything you've ever known," she said, clearly attempting to dissuade him without causing offense. "And what if the media discovers you're here?" He could sense Amara's hesitation through the faltering connection, the weight of years of protection and care she felt for him and his family. It was characteristic of her to try and shield him, even when it was she who needed assistance. "Then we'll ensure the media doesn't find out," Michael responded immediately, his mind already working through the logistical intricacies. "This trip will be entirely clandestine. No one will know my whereabouts or my purpose." The decision had been made, and Michael Jordan felt a familiar energy coursing through his veins. The same resolve that had propelled him to 6 NBA championships, the same hunger that had him rising at 5 a.m. for practice, while everyone else still slumbered. But this time, it wasn't about clinching a championship or shattering personal records. It was about something far more fundamental and human. Being there for someone who had been there for him when he needed it most. He walked to his desk and opened his MacBook Pro, his fingers already flying across the keyboard as he spoke with Amara. "I'm clearing my schedule for next week, no explanations given. My assistant Marcus will handle the travel arrangements, but he'll believe it's for confidential business meetings somewhere in Europe," he stated, already mentally strategizing how to execute this without raising any red flags. "Amara, I need you to promise me something. No one can know I'm Michael Jordan. If anyone asks, I'm just an American friend who came to help." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, envisioning Amara's face, her perpetually bright eyes, the smile that could light up any room, the dignity she maintained even in the most trying times. "Mr. Jordan, I don't know what to say," Amara whispered, her voice now trembling for entirely different reasons. "You don't need to say anything," Michael replied, glancing once more at the trophies adorning his office. Accolades that suddenly seemed far less significant than the mission he was about to undertake. Family is family no matter where we are in the world. Over the next 40 minutes, Michael Jordan orchestrated an operation of stealth that rivaled any military strategy. First, he called Marcus Thompson, his personal assistant of 15 years, a 45-year-old former Marine whose loyalty was absolute and whose discretion was legendary. "Marcus, I need you to arrange a trip for me, but it's highly confidential," he stated, employing a tone that brooked no questions. "Destination, Lagos, Nigeria. Departure tomorrow morning. I require business documentation to justify private business meetings in Africa. Perhaps something related to the expansion of the Jordan brand into emerging markets. Marcus, accustomed to his boss's unconventional requests, simply replied, "Understood, Mr. Jordan. I'll arrange comprehensive cover. Anything else?" Michael drummed his fingers on the mahogany desk, his mind already racing through the myriad details that would need to be organized in the coming hours. Marcus's military precision always impressed him. 15 years of working together had forged a seamless synchronicity between them. "Yes, I also want you to earmark $200,000 in cash in small denominations and transfer $500,000 to an account I'll provide you with. And Marcus, if anyone asks where I am, even my family, the answer is confidential business meetings in Europe, unreachable for a few days." Michael could hear the clatter of Marcus's keyboard on the other end of the line. Marcus already noting down every detail with his characteristic military precision. It was reassuring to know he had someone he could implicitly trust to execute such a sensitive matter. "Understood, Mr. Jordan. Will your wife be concerned?" Marcus inquired, demonstrating the genuine concern he felt for the Jordan family. Michael knew Marcus asked this not out of curiosity, but because he genuinely cared for the well-being of everyone in the Jordan household. It was this unwavering loyalty that made him far more than just an assistant. "She will be," Michael admitted, glancing at the framed photograph of Yvette Prieto and the twins on the desk. "But sometimes we must do what is right, even when it occasions temporary concern. No one in the family is to be apprised of any details." The decision was made. He would simply vanish under the cover of darkness. It would be the first time in decades that Michael Jordan had slipped away without offering a single explanation to anyone. When Yvette woke up in the morning and realized he wasn't in bed, she would begin searching for him around the house. When she couldn't find him, she would call Marcus in a panic, and Marcus, following instructions, would lie, stating that Michael had been urgently called away for confidential business meetings in Europe and was unreachable for a few days. The family would be worried, confused, but would believe the official narrative. They would never fathom that Michael Jordan was flying toward Lagos, Nigeria, to attend to a woman who once cared for his children. After hanging up, Michael remained silent for a few minutes, watching the lights of Chicago begin to twinkle as the winter sun dipped below the skyscrapers. He was on the cusp of embarking on the most perilous and profoundly personal journey of his adult life, a mission that bore no relation to basketball, business, or fame. The sheer gravity of his impending actions, vanishing without a trace, leaving his family completely in the dark, traveling to a country he did not know, all for a pledge made to a woman who had nurtured his children as if they were her own. Sometimes, he mused, true greatness doesn't unfold under the glare of public scrutiny, but in the shadows where no one is watching. Emirates Boeing 777 kissed the scorching tarmac of Murtala Muhammad International Airport at 2:47 p.m. Lagos local time, with Michael Jordan clenching his fingers into the first-class armrests as he felt the impact of the landing reverberating through his very bones. 22 hours of flight with 2 layovers had left his muscles stiff and his mind hyper-vigilant. But none of that mattered now. He was finally on Nigerian soil, thousands of miles from Chicago, on a continent he had only visited once during a Nike promotional tour in the 90s. Through the oval porthole, he could see the bustling airport terminal, a chaotic mass of humanity teeming like ants under the brutal African sun. And for the first time in decades, Michael Jordan felt genuinely apprehensive about what he was about to face. He adjusted the nondescript baseball cap that covered his graying hair and checked the Ray-Ban sunglasses that obscured his unmistakable eyes, recalling Marcus's words, "You're just Mike Johnson, American businessman on a business trip." His attire was deliberately understated. Faded Levi's jeans, plain white Nike sneakers, devoid of apparent logos, and a nondescript navy blue t-shirt he had purchased at a Chicago department store specifically to avoid drawing attention. 20 million people in this city, he murmured to himself, and I need to remain unnoticed by all of them. The aircraft door gaped open like a furnace, releasing a wave of humid heat that struck Michael like a solid wall, carrying with it the pungent aromas of an African metropolis, a complex melange of spices, burnt diesel, human perspiration, food being prepared over distant fires, and an indefinable essence unique to sprawling tropical cities. The thermometer read 38 degrees Celsius with 85% humidity, causing his shirt to cling to his back instantly as he walked down the jet bridge towards the main terminal. The contrast with Chicago's biting cold was so stark that he had to pause for a moment to acclimate, feeling beads of sweat begin to form on his forehead as he observed the throng of Nigerian, European, Arab, and American passengers melding into a human melting pot of languages, colors, and cultures. Impeccably dressed Nigerian executives conversed in British-accented English on their phones. Women draped in vibrant traditional Yoruba fabrics carried babies on their backs, and white tourists with cameras dangling from their necks appeared as disoriented as he felt. The cacophony of voices, English, Portuguese, Arabic, Hausa, and Yoruba, forged an urban symphony that was simultaneously exhilarating and daunting. "Welcome to the real Africa," Michael mused, adjusting the strap of his black backpack, which held $50,000 in cold, hard cash. "There's no turning back now." The thermometer read 38 degrees Celsius with 85% humidity, causing his shirt to cling to his back instantly as he walked down the jet bridge towards the main terminal. The contrast with Chicago's biting cold was so stark that he had to pause for a moment to acclimate, feeling beads of sweat begin to form on his forehead as he observed the throng of Nigerian, European, Arab, and American passengers melding into a human melting pot of languages, colors, and cultures. Impeccably dressed Nigerian executives conversed in British-accented English on their phones. Women draped in vibrant traditional Yoruba fabrics carried babies on their backs, and white tourists with cameras dangling from their necks appeared as disoriented as he felt. The cacophony of voices, English, Portuguese, Arabic, Hausa, and Yoruba, forged an urban symphony that was simultaneously exhilarating and daunting. "Welcome to the real Africa," Michael mused, adjusting the strap of his black backpack, which held $50,000 in cold, hard cash. "There's no turning back now." The immigration process proved to be an arduous 45-minute odyssey through snaking queues previously filled with sweaty, impatient travelers, Michael keeping his head down and silently praying his unassuming disguise would suffice to pass unnoticed. The officer, a tall man with tribal scars on his cheeks and clad in a military green uniform, meticulously scrutinized Michael's legitimate American passport while Michael controlled his breathing, acutely aware that being recognized could jeopardize the entire mission and put Amara at risk. "Purpose of your visit to our country, Mr. Jordan?" the officer inquired in heavily accented Nigerian English, reading the real name on the document, but clearly failing to make the connection to the legendary basketball player. Michael felt his heart quicken at the sound of his true name being uttered, yet the officer appeared solely focused on the routine bureaucratic procedure. "Business, meetings with potential local partners for commercial expansion," Michael replied, his voice calm and controlled, mentally grateful he was wearing ordinary attire and sunglasses. The officer stamped the passport with a dry thud and handed it back with a disinterested half-smile. "Welcome to Lagos, Mr. Jordan. May your meetings be prosperous." Michael nodded deferentially and proceeded toward the baggage claim area, his legs quivering imperceptibly from the surge of adrenaline and the profound relief of having gone unrecognized. "Sometimes simplicity is the best strategy," he muttered under his breath, adjusting the cap that concealed his silvering hair. Who would even look for Michael Jordan dressed in ordinary tourist attire? The airport's arrivals area was a human ocean of proportions Michael had never before encountered, even in the most teeming stadiums during the NBA playoffs. Hundreds of people congregated behind the metallic barriers, brandishing handwritten signs, shouting greetings in a cacophony of languages, and jostling for a better vantage point of the passengers emerging from the automated gates. Taxi drivers in sweat-stained yellow shirts bellowed ride offers in a blend of English and Yoruba. Hawkers wove through the throng, peddling chilled water, roasted peanuts, and international phone cards, while entire families boisterously celebrated the arrival of relatives from overseas. The din was deafening, a chaotic melange of conversations, car horns, African music blaring from distorted loudspeakers, and the incessant roar of bus and taxi engines arriving at and departing from the terminal. Michael frantically scanned the hundreds of faces for Amara, his heart quickening as he failed to discern her amidst the throngs. Then, piercing the bedlam, he heard a familiar voice cry out, "Mr. Jordan! Mr. Jordan!" And there she was, waving frantically with both hands above her head, tears already streaming down her face as she forged a path through the multitude towards him. "Amara," he whispered, feeling a surge of relief and emotion that nearly buckled his knees. "I made it. I truly managed to get here." Their reunion was an outpouring of emotions that transcended all cultural and geographical barriers. Amara practically flung herself into Michael's arms, sobbing uncontrollably as she embraced him with the fervent strength of someone who had lost all hope and then, against all odds, rediscovered it. Michael, a man who had publicly held his emotions in check for decades, felt his own eyes well up with tears as he embraced the woman who had been a second mother to his children, realizing how much she had thinned in the 3 years since she left Chicago. Amara appeared to have aged a decade. Her face was gaunter, etched with deep wrinkles around her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her calloused hands trembled as they touched his face as if he were an apparition. "Mr. Jordan." "No, Mike. I can't believe you actually came," she sobbed in English, interspersed with a few Yoruba words, her Nigerian accent thickened by emotion. "When you said you'd come, I thought maybe it was just, as you Americans say, wishful thinking. But you're here. You're actually here with me in Lagos." Around them, the throng surged on in its chaotic flow, but Michael felt as though they were encased in a private bubble of emotion and reconnection. "I promised I'd come, and the Jordans always keep their word," he said, gently holding her shoulders and looking directly into her eyes. "Now take me to Mama Nosi. I have a lot of work to do here." The walk to the parking lot was a journey through a completely alien universe for Michael Jordan, who had spent the last 40 years of his life being escorted through VIP entrances, private tunnels, and restricted areas that shielded him from direct contact with crowds. Now he was in the midst of the densest human mass he had ever experienced, being jostled, bumped, and accosted by hundreds of people who had no inkling of his identity. Street vendors shouted offers in broken English. "American man! You need SIM card! Very cheap! Only 500 naira!" Street children, some no older than 8, tugged at his shirt, begging for alms with large pleading eyes that pierced his soul. Men in colorful dashikis offered to carry his bag for small money, while women balancing enormous baskets of tropical fruits on their heads navigated through the throng with impossible grace. The scent of food being cooked over makeshift fires mingled with the acrid odor of car exhaust and the sweet fragrance of tropical flowers sold by local vendors. Michael kept his head down, clinging to Amara like an anchor through the chaos, but his eyes absorbed every detail of this new reality. The stark poverty coexisting with sheer vitality, the dignity of the people even amidst trying circumstances, and the infectious energy of a fully operational African metropolis. "This isn't what CNN shows about Africa," he mused, watching a group of young university students laughing boisterously while sharing a cell phone. "This is real. This is human life in its rawest, truest form." Amara's car was a white 2008 Toyota Corolla with visible dents, air conditioning that clearly didn't work, and faux leather seats cracked by the relentless tropical sun. Michael squeezed himself into the passenger seat, his 6'6" frame causing his knees to nearly touch the dashboard as Amara started the engine, which sputtered 3 times before catching. Through the windshield, he could see the airport parking lot, an endless expanse of cracked asphalt, where hundreds of cars, buses, motorcycle taxis, and trucks vied for space in a chaotic ballet that defied every traffic law he knew. Men in security uniforms whistled frantically, attempting to direct the flow of vehicles, while street vendors navigated between the stalled cars, offering everything from cell phones to live chickens. "Mr. Mike, I need to warn you about Lagos traffic," Amara said, carefully maneuvering between 2 packed buses spewing black smoke. "What you Americans call rush hour, here it's the whole day. From Ikeja to Makoko, it can take 2 hours, sometimes 3. but that will give us time to talk. Michael nodded, adjusting the half-loose seatbelt, and mentally braced himself for a journey through one of the world's most populous cities. I'm ready for whatever comes, he said, watching a group of children darting between cars selling chilled water in plastic sachets. This is your city now. You're my guide. Exiting the airport was Michael's first true cultural shock. What should have been a simple 5-minute maneuver morphed into a 30-minute odyssey through a traffic snarl that defied all logic. Hundreds of cars, yellow Danfo buses packed to overflowing, motorcycles carrying 2 or 3 riders, and even horse-drawn carts jostled for space on roads clearly not designed for such a volume of traffic. Traffic lanes were entirely disregarded. Vehicles carved out their own lanes, encroached upon the shoulders, and even utilized median strips as alternative thoroughfares. The noise was constant and deafening, horns blaring incessantly, engines roaring, hawkers yelling, loud music emanating from cars with modified sound systems, and the metallic screech of constantly applied brakes. Michael observed, captivated and appalled in equal measure, as an overloaded bus with people literally clinging to the doors overtook them on the shoulder, mere inches from their car, while the driver smiled and waved as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "My God," Michael murmured, clutching the center console as Amara swerved sharply to avoid a pothole that seemed capable of swallowing an entire car. "How do you all survive this traffic every single day?" Amara chuckled for the first time since their encounter, a sound Michael had missed. "Mr. Mike, in Lagos, one doesn't drive merely to reach a destination. You drive to partake in the dance. And this dance, it instills patience." As they departed from the airport area and delved into the heart of Lagos, Michael was confronted with urban contrasts so extreme that his mind struggled to reconcile the sights. On one side of the road, glass and steel skyscrapers soared against the blue sky, with logos of international banks, telecom companies, and multinational corporations gleaming under the African sun. Visual testaments to Lagos's standing as Africa's economic powerhouse and one of the world's fastest-growing cities. On the other side of the same road, sprawling informal settlements stretched as far as the eye could see, comprising thousands of makeshift dwellings cobbled together from corrugated zinc, reclaimed wood, and plastic, where entire families resided in spaces smaller than the walk-in closet of his Highland Park bedroom. Barefoot children played on dusty, unpaved streets, while their mothers laundered clothes in buckets of water, carried for miles balanced on their heads, and men hawked used car parts strewn across plastic tarps directly by the roadside. What most struck Michael was how these two realities coexisted in such stark proximity, separated only by barbed wire fences or concrete walls that felt more psychological than physical. "In Chicago, the poor live in certain areas and the rich in others," he remarked, watching an executive in a Mercedes-Benz pull up at a traffic light beside a family of 4 crammed onto a modified motorcycle. "Here, you literally live cheek by jowl." Amara nodded gravely, navigating through a gridlock where hawkers proffered their wares through car windows. "Lagos doesn't let you forget who you are, Mr. Mike. Rich or poor, we all share the same streets, the same heat, the same traffic. The city is a great equalizer." Over the ensuing 90 minutes, as the Toyota crawled through Lagos's congested arteries toward the Makoko district, Amara recounted stories that offered a glimpse into a world Michael had never conceived. She spoke of Mama Ngozi, who had toiled as a seamstress for 50 years, meticulously crafting wedding gowns for affluent women, while scrimping every naira to educate her 7 children. She detailed the community of Makoko, an aquatic slum built entirely on stilts over Lagos Lagoon, where 300,000 people lived their entire lives atop the water, navigating by canoe to work, study, and socialize. Most outsiders assume Makoko is merely a locus of destitution and despair, Amara elucidated, pausing at another traffic light where children hawked newspapers and confections amidst the vehicles. "But Mr. Mike, it is a bona fide community. We boast schools, churches, markets, even an internet cafe. People marry, raise families, commemorate milestones, and harbor aspirations for the future. It's a complete human existence. simply architected upon water instead of solid ground. Michael listened in contemplative silence, imbibing every word as he observed the urban panorama gradually transmute from towering skyscrapers to middle-class enclaves, then into increasingly dense and makeshift districts as they neared the lagoon. For the first time in his adult life, he was genuinely confronted with the stark reality of his own ignorance regarding the lived experience of the majority of humanity. "Amara," he finally uttered, his voice imbued with unfeigned emotion. "I had presumed I was coming here to offer assistance, yet I now realize it is you who will impart some much-needed lessons." The initial glimpse of Makoko rendered Michael utterly speechless, a spectacle that defied every preconception he harbored about human habitation, and one that would forever be etched into his memory. Stretching as far as his gaze could encompass across the murky waters of Lagos Lagoon, thousands of wooden structures rose on stilts like a phantom city that had materialized directly from the depths, interconnected by an intricate network of precarious wooden bridges that seemed to defy all laws of physics and engineering. Dwellings constructed entirely from salvaged timber planks, corrugated zinc, and plastic sheeting sheltered entire families mere meters above the lagoon surface, where canoes navigated the water streets, much like automobiles in a conventional city. Children played barefoot on small wooden verandas that functioned as suspended courtyards, while women hung laundry on improvised clotheslines that swayed gently with the perpetual breeze emanating from the water. The soundscape was a singular aquatic symphony, the soft lapping of waves against the wooden pilings, the ceaseless creaking of structures gently swaying with the wind, the murmur of voices conversing in Yoruba reverberating across the water, and the rhythmic splash of paddles cleaving the lagoon surface. Michael observed it all through the Toyota's hazy windshield, grappling with the fact that 300,000 people genuinely lived their entire lives upon this expanse of water. "My God, Amara," he whispered, his voice laced with awe and disbelief. "How did you manage to construct an entire city afloat on water?" The arrival of an American stranger in Makoko did not go unnoticed, but Michael quickly discerned that the community's curiosity was tempered by a genuine hospitality he had rarely encountered, even within Chicago's most exclusive echelons. Dozens of children scurried across the wooden bridges, trailing the car to the point where the paved road abruptly ceased at the lagoon's edge, their faces beaming with inquisitive smiles as they shouted greetings in a blend of English and Yoruba. Men in faded t-shirts and torn shorts paused their endeavors, some mending fishing nets, others crafting canoes with rudimentary tools, to nod respectfully as Amara introduced Michael simply as, "My American friend who has come to visit Mama Nosi." Women balancing infants on their backs and bearing baskets of fish on their heads approached them with careful steps along the wooden planks that served as walkways, offering words of welcome in carefully enunciated English they had clearly rehearsed for special occasions such as this. What struck Michael most profoundly was the utter absence of solicitations for money or handouts. Unlike his experiences on the streets of Lagos, here people simply wished to meet him, inquire about his origins, and ensure he felt welcomed into their community. "Mr. Jordan, here in Makoko, we are not poor," an elderly man with grizzled hair stated, extending a calloused hand to greet him. "We are a community, and a community always welcomes visitors with joy." Amara's dwelling was a two-room structure built entirely on stilts, 10 feet above the water, with walls fashioned from reclaimed planks of aged vessels that still bore traces of sun and salt-faded blue and red paint. The corrugated zinc roof was held in place by heavy stones and old tires, casting a shifting tapestry of shadows and light across the interior as the sun traversed the sky. Michael had to stoop to enter through the low doorway, revealing a space no larger than 20 square meters, yet accommodating 8 members of Amara's extended family. Her 2 adult sons, a pregnant daughter-in-law, 3 young grandchildren, and in the most sheltered corner of the dwelling, on a wooden bed draped with a white mosquito net, lay Mama Ngozi. Furnishings were virtually non-existent. A few handcrafted wooden stools, a low table where the family partook of meals seated on the floor, makeshift shelves adorning the walls holding their meager possessions, and at the heart of the main room, a small altar adorned with family photographs and candles that offered illumination once the sun had set. The floor consisted of wooden planks with gaps between them, through which Michael could discern the lagoon's water undulating just a few feet below, a constant reminder that the family's entire existence transpired literally atop the liquid element. There was no restroom within the dwelling. Amara elucidated that the sanitary facilities were constructed in separate structures connected by wooden bridges directly over the lagoon. "Welcome to our home, Mr. Jordan," Amara declared with genuine pride, gesturing with her arm to encompass the modest space. "We may not possess much, but what we do have, we share with gladness." The initial encounter between Michael Jordan and Mama Ngozi was a moment of unadulterated human magic that transcended all barriers of age, culture, and economic circumstance. The 78-year-old matriarch lay upon her simple bed, visibly frail due to the pulmonary infection that had plagued her final months. Yet her brown eyes still gleamed with an intelligence and vivacity that immediately captivated Michael. When Amara introduced him in Yoruba as the American man who has come to aid our family, Mama Ngozi struggled to sit up in bed, extending her small, calloused hands toward him with a smile that radiated maternal warmth. Her hands trembled slightly, yet her grip was firm as she enveloped Michael's colossal hands in her own, gazing directly into his eyes with an intensity that made him feel as though she could peer directly into his very soul. "You possess kind eyes," she uttered in surprisingly clear English, albeit with a pronounced Nigerian accent. "Amara told me you're highly influential in America, but here, you're just another son who has come to visit his family." Michael felt his eyes welling up with tears at the profound simplicity of her words, realizing that this small, frail woman possessed a wisdom that all his accomplishments and wealth had failed to bestow upon him. "Mama Ngozi," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "it is an honor to meet you. Amara always spoke of your strength and wisdom, and now I understand why." Michael's exploration of Makoko commenced the following day, when Amara took him to see the floating school, a brightly painted wooden structure housing 80 children in a space originally designed for 20, where children aged 5 to 16 huddled together on makeshift benches fashioned from planks propped up by concrete blocks. The teacher, a young woman named Sister Grace, conducted lessons without textbooks, scribing math, English, and science lessons onto a cracked blackboard using chalk scraps she carefully rationed to last the entire week. The children shared the few available pencils and notebooks, passing the materials from hand to hand as each completed their exercises, exhibiting a patience and cooperation Michael had rarely witnessed, even in Chicago's most expensive private schools. What struck him most was the palpable thirst for knowledge in the children's eyes. They leaned forward on their uncomfortable benches, eagerly raised their hands to answer questions, and recited lessons in unison with genuine fervor, despite the precarious conditions. Michael observed a girl of approximately 10 years old mentally tackling intricate mathematical problems without paper to perform calculations, displaying an intellectual prowess that would be remarkable in any context. "Sister Grace, how do these children learn so much with so few resources?" he asked as he watched a group of students sharing a single English textbook that had been mended with adhesive tape dozens of times. "Mr. Jordan," she replied, a smile radiating determination, "when you possess so little, you cherish every opportunity to learn." These children are acutely aware that education represents their sole conduit to a brighter future. During his second afternoon in Makoko, Michael stumbled upon something that utterly captivated him, an improvised basketball court constructed entirely on stilts, where young community members played barefoot on wooden planks that flexed perilously beneath their feet with every movement. The court was, in essence, a rectangular platform roughly 15 meters by 8, fashioned from salvaged wooden planks, leveled as best as possible, featuring makeshift hoops crafted from metal rims welded to wooden posts and nets woven from nylon rope. The wooden surface was worn smooth and polished by the bare feet of hundreds of players over the years. Some planks were loose, clattering as the youth dashed across them, and there were no official court markings, only visual boundaries that all players knew by heart. Michael watched mesmerized as approximately a dozen youths aged 14 to 20 engaged in an intense game, exhibiting raw talent that rivaled many players he had observed on professional courts, adapting their movements to the instability of the wooden surface with an athletic grace that seemed almost preternatural. The auditory experience was singular. The thud of the worn basketball interspersed with the creak of flexing wooden planks, shouts of encouragement in Yoruba and English, and the occasional splash when a ball, launched with too much force, plunged into the lagoon, necessitating someone to hop into a canoe for its retrieval. "You play better on this wooden court than many Americans do on $50,000 parquet floors," Michael remarked, observing a young man execute a spectacular layup despite the precarious conditions. One of the players, profusely sweating and grinning broadly, retorted, "Mr. Jordan, once you master playing on swaying wood, every other court feels effortless." It was on this makeshift court that Michael encountered Joseph, a 16-year-old whose innate talent for basketball was so palpable that Michael immediately discerned the potential for a future professional athlete. Joseph was tall for his age, approximately 1.85 meters, possessing long arms, exceptional coordination, and an intuitive grasp of the game that could not be taught, only honed. He played with a fierce yet disciplined intensity, consistently looking to set up his teammates before attempting his own shots, demonstrating a maturity and court vision that profoundly impressed Michael. What particularly captivated his attention was Joseph's seamless adaptation to the constraints of the wooden court. His movements were fluid yet judicious. He meticulously avoided maneuvers that might splinter the floorboards or jeopardize other players, and he had cultivated a distinctive yet remarkably effective shot that cleverly compensated for the erratic give of the floorboards. Following the game, Joseph tentatively approached Michael, clearly aware he was in the presence of someone significant, yet without fully grasping his identity. "Sir, Amara told me you know about basketball in America," Joseph began, his words meticulously articulated in the English he had acquired at the floating school. "Could you perhaps instruct me on how to refine my game? I aspire to play professionally someday, perhaps even in America." Michael felt a pang in his heart at the sight of the unvarnished hope in the young man's eyes, recognizing in him the very same hunger and tenacity that had propelled his own career decades prior. "Joseph," Michael replied, placing a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder, "you already possess the most crucial elements, passion and innate talent. I will impart to you everything within my power during my time here." Michael's immersion in life in Makoko continued when he encountered Fatima, a 14-year-old whose mathematical acumen was so exceptional that she had become a local legend among the teachers of the floating school. By day, Fatima navigated Makoko's water streets in a small canoe, selling potable water in plastic sachets to the community's families. But during her leisure hours, she tackled complex mathematical problems that Sister Grace brought from university textbooks borrowed from Lagos. Michael observed her working on a differential calculus problem, using only a piece of charcoal on a wooden board as a blackboard, her mental calculations transcribed with a precision that would put many American university students to shame. When he attempted to converse with her about mathematics, he discovered that Fatima had developed her own methods for solving intricate equations, creating mathematical shortcuts out of sheer necessity due to the lack of adequate educational materials. "Miss Fatima," Michael said, watching her solve a trigonometry problem that he himself would have struggled to comprehend, "have you ever considered studying mathematics at university?" Fatima smiled shyly, continuing her calculations as she replied, "Mr. Jordan, at university they have calculators and computers. Here in Makoko, we only have our minds. Perhaps that makes us stronger in mathematics." Her words contained a wisdom that took Michael several minutes to fully process. "You might be right, Fatima," he finally responded. "Sometimes having fewer resources compels one to develop deeper skills." The nights in Makoko proved to be a transformative experience that reconnected Michael with aspects of human life he had forgotten existed in his privileged Chicago existence. As the sun set over the lagoon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple that mirrored themselves on the water's surface like a liquid looking glass, the entire community transformed into a natural amphitheater illuminated by hundreds of candles, oil lamps, and small bonfires that gleamed like terrestrial stars scattered across the aquatic expanse. Michael learned to traverse the wooden walkways in the dark, cultivating a balance and confidence he had never required during his strolls on paved sidewalks, and discovered that the complete absence of electricity fostered a social intimacy that modern technology had eradicated from his life. Families convened on their small verandas to share simple meals. Fresh fish caught from the lagoon itself, rice seasoned with local spices, cassava flour that served as bread, and tropical fruits cultivated in floating gardens fashioned from abandoned canoes. Michael participated in these meals seated on the ground, upon straw mats, eating with his hands as was customary for the entire community, uncovering flavors his life of expensive restaurants had never afforded him. Conversations unfolded in a captivating blend of English, Yoruba, and Portuguese, with tales recounted and retold across generations, legends concerning Makoko's earliest settlers, accounts of storms that tested the community's resilience, and shared aspirations for the children's future. "Mr. Jordan," an elderly fisherman remarked as they shared grilled fish by candlelight, "in Makoko, we have no television or internet, so our narratives serve as our entertainment, and every individual possesses a story worth recounting." Michael's exploration of Makoko commenced the following day when Amara took him to see the floating school, a brightly painted wooden structure housing 80 children in a space originally designed for 20, where children aged 5 to 16 huddled together on makeshift benches fashioned from planks propped up by concrete blocks. The teacher, a young woman named Sister Grace, conducted lessons without textbooks, scribing math, English, and science lessons onto a cracked blackboard using chalk scraps she carefully rationed to last the entire week. The children shared the few available pencils and notebooks, passing the materials from hand to hand as each completed their exercises, exhibiting a patience and cooperation Michael had rarely witnessed, even in Chicago's most expensive private schools. What struck him most was the palpable thirst for knowledge in the children's eyes. They leaned forward on their uncomfortable benches, eagerly raised their hands to answer questions, and recited lessons in unison with genuine fervor, despite the precarious conditions. Michael observed a girl of approximately 10 years old mentally tackling intricate mathematical problems without paper to perform calculations, displaying an intellectual prowess that would be remarkable in any context. "Sister Grace, how do these children learn so much with so few resources?" he asked as he watched a group of students sharing a single English textbook that had been mended with adhesive tape dozens of times. "Mr. Jordan," she replied, a smile radiating determination, "when you possess so little, you cherish every opportunity to learn." These children are acutely aware that education represents their sole conduit to a brighter future. During his second afternoon in Makoko, Michael stumbled upon something that utterly captivated him: an improvised basketball court constructed entirely on stilts, where young community members played barefoot on wooden planks that flexed perilously beneath their feet with every movement. The court was, in essence, a rectangular platform roughly 15 meters by 8, fashioned from salvaged wooden planks, leveled as best as possible, featuring makeshift hoops crafted from metal rims welded to wooden posts and nets woven from nylon rope. The wooden surface was worn smooth and polished by the bare feet of hundreds of players over the years. Some planks were loose, clattering as the youth dashed across them, and there were no official court markings, only visual boundaries that all players knew by heart. Michael watched mesmerized as approximately a dozen youths aged 14 to 20 engaged in an intense game, exhibiting raw talent that rivaled many players he had observed on professional courts, adapting their movements to the instability of the wooden surface with an athletic grace that seemed almost preternatural. The auditory experience was singular. The thud of the worn basketball interspersed with the creak of flexing wooden planks, shouts of encouragement in Yoruba and English, and the occasional splash when a ball, launched with too much force, plunged into the lagoon, necessitating someone to hop into a canoe for its retrieval. "You play better on this wooden court than many Americans do on $50,000 parquet floors," Michael remarked, observing a young man execute a spectacular layup despite the precarious conditions. One of the players, profusely sweating and grinning broadly, retorted, "Mr. Jordan, once you master playing on swaying wood, every other court feels effortless." It was on this makeshift court that Michael encountered Joseph, a 16-year-old whose innate talent for basketball was so palpable that Michael immediately discerned the potential for a future professional athlete. Joseph was tall for his age, approximately 1.85 meters, possessing long arms, exceptional coordination, and an intuitive grasp of the game that could not be taught, only honed. He played with a fierce yet disciplined intensity, consistently looking to set up his teammates before attempting his own shots, demonstrating a maturity and court vision that profoundly impressed Michael. What particularly captivated his attention was Joseph's seamless adaptation to the constraints of the wooden court. His movements were fluid yet judicious. He meticulously avoided maneuvers that might splinter the floorboards or jeopardize other players, and he had cultivated a distinctive yet remarkably effective shot that cleverly compensated for the erratic give of the floorboards. Michael's personal transformation culminated during his fourth night in Makoko, when he finally grasped the profound extent of his own ignorance regarding happiness, community, and life's purpose. Perched on Amara's veranda, observing the full moon's reflection on the lagoon's placid surface, while listening to the gentle murmur of families conversing in their nearby homes, he experienced an inner tranquility he hadn't felt in decades. There was no cacophony of car horns, no blinding artificial lights, or the relentless pressure of business commitments, only the profound simplicity of individuals living in harmony with their natural surroundings, irrespective of the material constraints they encountered. Michael realized he had spent the past 2 decades of his life amassing achievements, accolades, and affluence in an unceasing quest for gratification, whereas these individuals had discovered genuine contentment in relationships, community, and a connection to something greater than themselves. "Amara," he said, observing the flickering candlelight in the windows of the surrounding homes, "I came here thinking I would teach or assist you in some way. But I'm beginning to realize that it is you who are teaching me things I didn't even know I needed to learn." Amara smiled in the darkness, her voice imbued with the wisdom of one who had traversed 2 utterly disparate worlds. "Mr. Jordan, true wealth isn't about how much money you have in the bank. It's about how many people genuinely care when you come home. Here in Makoko, everyone is wealthy." The morning of the 5th day in Makoko ushered in an urgency that transformed Michael from a quiet observer into a man of resolute action, when Mama Ngozi awoke with severe respiratory distress that sent the entire family into a panic. The sound of her labored breathing reverberated through the small wooden dwelling as a brutal reminder that, despite the community's inherent beauty and the profound life lessons Michael had absorbed, medical reality could no longer be disregarded. Amara rushed about the house, checking Mama Ngozi's temperature with the back of her hand, attempting to get her to drink warm water with honey, but it was evident that home remedies would be woefully inadequate to treat a pulmonary infection that had advanced significantly in recent days. Michael observed the scene with mounting resolve, remembering why he had traveled thousands of kilometers, not to be an emotional voyeur, but to ensure this remarkable woman received the medical care she rightfully deserved. He knelt beside Mama Ngozi's bedside, gently holding her hand as she struggled for breath, and made a silent vow that would reverberate in his mind for the ensuing hours. "Amara, we're taking her to the hospital right now," Michael said with the calm authority he had habitually employed to lead teams through moments of crisis. "And we're not going to a public hospital. We're heading directly to the finest private hospital in Lagos, regardless of the expense." The journey to Lagos General Hospital was an experience that tested every boundary of patience and compassion Michael believed he possessed, compelling him to confront a public healthcare system operating under unimaginable pressures. The hospital was a sprawling complex of faded green concrete structures, besieged by hundreds of people literally encamped in the parking lots and gardens, some for days on end, awaiting basic medical attention that might never materialize. Interminable lines of patients snaked through the main corridors and extended beyond the building's exterior, with individuals slumped on the concrete floor clutching medical documents in plastic envelopes, ailing children slumbering in the laps of exhausted parents, and the elderly leaning heavily on makeshift crutches fashioned from wooden branches. The pervasive odor was an acrid melange of cheap disinfectant, expired pharmaceuticals, concentrated human perspiration, and an elusive tang that Michael eventually recognized as the very essence of sickness and human desperation. Nurses in stained uniforms scurried back and forth, laden with stacks of papers and medical equipment that had unequivocally seen better days, while young doctors with deep-set eyes grappled with an insurmountable demand, using resources demonstrably insufficient for the populace they served. Michael bore Mama Ngozi in his arms through this throng of humanity, perceiving the weight not solely of her delicate frame, but of the systemic injustice that condemned individuals such as her to languish without access to rudimentary care. Mr. Jordan, you now comprehend the depth of my desperation when I contacted you, Amara whispered, striving to carve a path through the dense crowd. This is the healthcare system most Nigerians contend with. Endless queues and hope that dwindles with each passing day. The decision to usher Mama Ngozi directly into the hospital's private wing unveiled a Lagos of stark contrast, a parallel realm existing literally within the very same edifice, yet distinctly partitioned from the public reality by glass doors, functioning air conditioning, and the imperceptible yet insurmountable barrier of wealth. Michael simply walked to the private reception desk with Mama Ngozi in his arms and uttered the magic words that instantly transformed their experience. I require the finest physician available for this lady, and I will pay in cash, immediately. The transformation was so dramatic, it seemed like a conjurer's trick. Within 5 minutes, Mama Ngozi was settled in a pristine bed within an air-conditioned room, being examined by a physician who had studied in London and spoke flawless English, while attentive nurses monitored her vital signs with state-of-the-art equipment. The stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind on the other side of the glass door was so extreme that Michael felt a complex mixture of relief for Mama Ngozi and profound anger at the systemic injustice. Dr. Adebayo, a middle-aged man with elegant spectacles and refined demeanor, examined Mama Ngozi with genuine solicitude, explaining each procedure in English for Michael and in Yoruba for her, demonstrating a medical proficiency that rivaled any hospital in Chicago. Your grandmother is suffering from advanced bacterial pneumonia, but we can effectively manage this with antibiotics and respiratory therapy, Dr. Adebayo explained, adjusting the oximeter on Mama Ngozi's finger. With appropriate treatment, she can make a full recovery within 2 weeks. The total cost will be approximately 500,000 naira. Michael mentally calculated the conversion, approximately 1,200 US dollars, less than he would spend on a single meal at high-end Chicago restaurants. Doctor, spare no expense, Michael responded instantly, withdrawing a thick envelope of cash from his backpack. And if there are other patients out there who require assistance but cannot afford it, please include their costs as well. While Mama Ngozi received treatment in the air-conditioned comfort of the private sector, Michael resolved to utilize the ensuing hours productively by heading to the renowned Balogun market, one of West Africa's largest open-air markets, with a specific mission he had formulated during his contemplative nights in Makoko. He had realized that the children of the floating school desperately needed fundamental learning materials, that the makeshift basketball court deserved at least an official ball, and that many families in the community struggled with access to clean potable water. Balogun Market assaulted all of Michael's senses simultaneously, a kaleidoscopic explosion of colors, sounds, smells, and human activity that sprawled across acres of narrow streets, canopied by colorful tarpaulins, creating a commercial labyrinth of impossible complexity. Thousands of merchants sold literally everything the human mind could conceive. Traditional fabrics in vibrant geometric patterns, spices in open sacks perfuming the air for yards around, imported electronics piled in precarious towers, second-hand clothing from the United States and Europe organized by color and size, tropical fruits in artisanally woven baskets, and handcrafted goods made by local communities. The din was constant and energizing. Merchants shouting prices in multiple languages, shoppers haggling with theatrical passion, Afro-beat music blaring from makeshift sound systems, and the rhythmic shuffle of hundreds of feet on the packed earth floor. Michael navigated through this commercial symphony, carrying a specific mental list, determined to leverage his anonymous presence to experience Lagos as any ordinary shopper. This place makes the magnificent mile seem like a quiet suburban mall, he mused, watching a woman balance three giant baskets on her head while negotiating prices. This is where true African commerce unfolds. No credit cards, no barcodes, just people conducting business in the world's most ancient manner. Michael's first stop was at a stall specializing in educational supplies, where a young merchant named Kemi sold notebooks, pencils, pens, and used textbooks, meticulously arranged in careful stacks beneath a blue tarpaulin that shielded her wares from the intense sun. Michael explained that he needed supplies for 80 children at a community school, and Kemi immediately shifted into negotiation mode, calculating prices, offering bulk discounts, and suggesting cheaper alternatives when Michael mentioned his limited budget. What impressed Michael most was how Kemi handled the transaction with absolute professional gravity, discussing paper quality, pencil durability, and suitability of educational content with an expertise that rivaled any specialized vendor he had encountered in the United States. "American brother, did you say it's for a community school?" Kemi inquired, scrutinizing Michael with mounting curiosity. "These children, do they truly wish to learn?" When Michael recounted the thirst for knowledge he had observed at the floating school, the children's genuine enthusiasm, despite the dire circumstances, and Sister Grace's unwavering dedication, Kemi began adding supplementary items to the packages without increasing the price. "Brother, anyone who travels from America to assist our children warrants a special discount," Kemi declared, meticulously packaging 100 notebooks, 200 pencils, 50 pens, and 20 basic mathematics textbooks into sturdy plastic bags. "These children are our future. If you are investing in them, I too shall contribute." Michael paid the agreed-upon price and added a generous gratuity, but what moved him most was the expression of profound pride on Kemi's face. "Kemi, you're not merely vending school supplies," Michael stated, carrying the heavy bags. "You are investing in Nigeria's future, one child at a time." The quest for basketballs led Michael through various sections of the market to an area specializing in sporting goods, where he encountered an astounding variety of products, ranging from traditional soccer balls to table tennis equipment, and even some basketball items that had clearly been imported from the United States or China. The vendor, a middle-aged man sporting a Lakers jersey, which brought an internal smile to Michael's face, had only 3 basketballs in stock, 2 distinctly used and 1 pristine, still in its original Spalding packaging. Michael examined the new ball with the discerning eye of someone who had handled thousands during his career, testing the pressure, assessing the quality of the synthetic leather, and envisioning Joseph and the other youth's reaction upon touching it for the first time. "My friend, do you play basketball?" the vendor inquired, observing how Michael handled the ball with professional familiarity. "You have the demeanor of a player, very tall, large hands, the way you check the ball." Michael chuckled, maintaining his cover, yet finding pleasure in discussing the sport that had dominated his life. "I played a fair amount in my youth," he responded modestly, dribbling the ball a few times on the market's packed dirt floor. "Now I'd like to donate this ball to some talented youngsters who play under what one might call creative conditions." The vendor grinned widely, clearly recognizing a kindred spirit. "Brother, these youths are fortunate to have someone like you. This ball will last for years if they take good care of it." Michael purchased the 3 balls along with some makeshift training cones, already envisioning the practice sessions he could orchestrate on the stilt court. Sometimes, he mused as he placed the balls into a capacious bag, the simplest gifts yield the most profound moments. The final significant stop at the market was for water filters, an item Michael had added to his list after observing families in Makoko boiling lagoon water in pots over small open fires, a process that consumed precious time and firewood, which was both costly and scarce. The household goods section of the market was a labyrinth of stalls peddling everything from aluminum pots to small electrical appliances, but locating portable water filters proved more challenging than Michael had anticipated. After inquiring at several stalls and being directed through multiple market sections, he finally found a vendor specializing in water purification equipment who had precisely what he sought: portable ceramic filters that could be fitted into ordinary buckets and would provide clean, potable water for entire families for months. The vendor, an enterprising woman named Folick, explained how the filters functioned, demonstrated the installation process, and even offered a complimentary workshop to educate families on proper system maintenance. "Mr. American, water is life," Folaki said, her words imbued with profound conviction. "These families you want to help, they will be healthy, the children will grow strong, mothers will not fret daily about clean water." Michael purchased 50 filters, sufficient for the majority of Makoko's families, along with printed instructions in English and Yoruba. The cumulative weight of all his purchases was beginning to strain his physical limits, but he declined to hire porters, determined to experience the market as any ordinary shopper would. "Folick, these filters will revolutionize the daily lives of these families," Michael said, perspiring profusely as he arranged the heavy bags. Sometimes the most profound changes originate from the most fundamental needs. The endeavor of transporting all the supplies back through the market became a physical ordeal that tested every muscle Michael had honed over decades of athletic conditioning. But it also unveiled a facet of human nature that moved him deeply. Hauling numerous heavy bags through the market's narrow, crowded aisles, perspiring profusely in the 40 degrees Celsius heat, Michael began to contend with the sheer weight and bulk of the items he had procured for the Makoko community. Other vendors, observing this tall American clearly struggling, yet determined to carry his own purchases, began to spontaneously offer assistance, not out of expectation of payment, but because they recognized someone genuinely endeavoring to do good for those in need. A young fruit vendor offered to carry some bags to the parking area. A woman selling textiles insisted on pressing a bottle of ice-cold water into Michael's hand upon seeing him profusely perspiring. And even children playing amidst the stalls began to assist, ferrying smaller items and carving paths through the throng. What began as a solo shopping expedition transformed into a communal endeavor, with strangers coalescing to help Michael fulfill his mission. "Brother, what you are doing for these people in Makoko is a beautiful thing," said the young fruit vendor, toting a bag of water filters. "When we uplift one another, everyone prospers." Michael felt his eyes well up, not from perspiration, but from the profound emotion of experiencing firsthand the pervasive generosity that emerged when people recognized genuine kindness in action. "You know what?" Michael responded, his voice thick with gratitude. "I arrived in Africa under the impression I would impart some lessons. But it turns out Africa is teaching me everything I needed to know about what truly matters." The return to Makoko proved to be a triumphant procession that invigorated the entire community in a way Michael could never have anticipated, transforming a mere supply delivery into a spontaneous celebration that underscored the potency of shared generosity among people who understood both struggle and hope. Michael arrived back at the lagoon community laden with bags brimming with educational materials, sports equipment, and water purification systems. But what awaited him was a throng of children, parents, and elders who had convened because word had spread that the American visitor had embarked on a mission to Lagos to procure items that would benefit everyone. The excitement was palpable. Children bouncing up and down, eager to glimpse inside the bags. Parents conversing animatedly in Yoruba about what this might signify for their families, and elders nodding in approval at this display of care that transcended all cultural and geographical boundaries. Joseph was among the first to approach, his gaze immediately fixated on the basketball in the transparent plastic bag, his hands trembling slightly as Michael handed over a ball that represented not merely a piece of equipment, but a symbol of possibility extending far beyond sports. "Mr. Jordan, is this a real basketball?" Joseph whispered, holding the ball as if it were crafted from precious metal rather than synthetic leather. "I've never touched a ball like this. It feels professional." The moment Joseph dribbled an official basketball for the first time in his life was something Michael would forever remember, a look of unadulterated joy and determination that reminded him why he had fallen in love with the game decades earlier. "Joseph," Michael said, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder, "this ball represents more than equipment. It signifies possibility, dreams, and the future you can forge through hard work and dedication. The distribution of educational materials to the children of the floating school created a scene of such unalloyed happiness that Michael had to step back and simply observe the impact of seemingly simple gifts when they reach communities where every resource is precious and scarce. Sister Grace organized the children into orderly lines, but their excitement was barely contained. They whispered among themselves in Yoruba and English, pointed at the stacks of notebooks and pencils, and practically vibrated with anticipation as each child received their own personal set of learning materials. For many of these children, this was the first time they would possess a notebook that didn't need to be shared, a pencil that didn't need to be rationed, or a book they could study at home without worrying about returning it to the school immediately. Michael observed as a little girl named Blessing clutched her new notebook to her chest as if it were a precious doll, while a boy named Emmanuel immediately began testing his new pencil on the margin of an old piece of paper, drawing geometric shapes with a meticulous precision that spoke volumes about his mathematical interests. "Sister Grace, look at their faces," Michael remarked, his voice catching slightly. "These materials are not merely tools for learning, they are symbols of possibility, proof that someone believes in their potential." Sister Grace smiled through tears she made no attempt to conceal, her voice firm yet emotional as she responded. "Mr. Jordan, you have given these children more than mere supplies. You have given them proof that their education matters, that their dreams are worth investing in, and that they are not forgotten by the world." 6 weeks after his unexpected arrival in Makoko, Michael Jordan found himself standing before a sight he had never imagined possible. An official basketball court built entirely on stilts, painted in the vibrant blue and yellow hues that reflected the community's spirit, with makeshift bleachers crafted from wooden planks that stretched out over the lagoon, like welcoming arms embracing what had become Makoko's pulsating heart. The structure, funded entirely by Michael, but erected by the calloused hands of dozens of community men toiling in 12-hour shifts daily for an entire month, was far more than a mere sports court. It was a tangible symbol of hope, a monument to the human capacity to transform dreams into reality when resources meet resolve. The backboards were official, imported directly from the United States, with white nylon nets that swayed gently in the constant breeze off the lagoon, while the court's markings had been painted with millimeter-perfect precision by Joseph and other young people who had studied official diagrams as if they were sacred texts. Hundreds of people thronged the bleachers and perimeter of the court, forming a human amphitheater that echoed with lively conversations in Yoruba, English, and Portuguese, all awaiting the historic moment that would mark not merely the inauguration of a court, but the celebration of a transformation that had touched every life in Makoko. "Mr. Jordan," Joseph said, approaching, an official basketball clutched in his hands, donning the first basketball uniform of his life. "This court isn't merely a place to play. It's a testament to the fact that our dreams matter to someone in this world." The dedication ceremony commenced with a solemn procession, a profound demonstration of the deep spirituality and communal ethos that define Makoko, as Mama Ngozi, now fully recovered from her pneumonia and radiant with renewed health, was borne aloft on a chair adorned with vibrant fabrics by the community's most revered elders to the center of the court where Michael awaited her. At 78, she appeared to have shed a decade, imbued with a newfound vitality since the inception of her medical treatment. Her eyes gleamed with the same intensity Michael had observed during their initial encounter, now complemented by an energy and strength that radiated dignity and ancestral wisdom. She was arrayed in her finest traditional Yoruba dress, a magnificent fabric in verdant and gold hues that had belonged to her own mother, and cradled in her hands a small vial of palm oil slated for the ceremonial blessing of the court. The multitude fell silent respectfully as she rose from the chair with Michael's assistance, her small yet firm hands clasping his as she gazed directly into his eyes with an intensity that seemed to pierce his very soul. "Michael Jordan," she articulated in clear English, her voice imbued with the gravitas of decades of wisdom and experience. "You arrived in our community as a wealthy man from America, yet today you depart as our son. This blessing extends beyond merely the court. It is for you so that you may carry the strength and love of Makoko in your heart wherever your journey takes you." Mama Ngozi's words reverberated across the lagoon like a potent prayer, and Michael felt tears stream down his face, making no attempt to conceal them. "Mama Ngozi," he replied, his voice thick with genuine emotion, "I arrived here believing I would bestow something upon you, but I now realize you have given me far more than I could ever hope to reciprocate." The inaugural official game on Makoko's new court was a spectacle of raw talent, unbridled passion, and pure joy that rivaled any professional match Michael had witnessed throughout his career, unequivocally demonstrating that athletic excellence was not contingent upon lavish facilities, but rather upon unwavering dedication and genuine love for the sport. Joseph spearheaded a squad of local youths against a contingent of high school players from Lagos specially invited for the occasion. And from the opening tip-off, it was evident that months of informal coaching under Michael had forged these young men into formidable athletes. Joseph glided across the regulation court with a grace and self-assurance utterly distinct from the timid boy Michael had encountered 6 weeks prior. His passes were precise and inventive. His shots evinced a consistency born of hours of daily practice, and his on-court leadership displayed a maturity that impressed even the most skeptical visitors. Fatima, now clad in a gleaming new school uniform Michael had provided, meticulously kept the official game statistics in a neatly organized notebook, deploying her mathematical genius to compute shooting percentages, pass efficiency, and other advanced metrics she had gleaned from studying American basketball websites. The bleachers erupted in shouts of encouragement with every converted basket, every successful defensive play, every spectacular maneuver, underscoring how innate talent could burgeon when provided with the proper tools and opportunities. Michael observed from his vantage point beside Mama Ngozi, his heart swelling with paternal pride as he watched Joseph execute a spectacular layup that drew enthusiastic applause from the entire community. "Joseph is playing as if he were born for this court," Michael remarked, observing the young man dish out a perfect assist to a teammate. "Just 6 weeks ago, he was playing barefoot on loose boards, and now he looks like a professional athlete in the making." The most poignant surprise of the ceremony arrived when Michael publicly announced that he had established a scholarship fund that would enable Joseph and other talented youths from Makoko to attend private schools in Lagos, with the eventual prospect of college scholarships and even collegiate basketball opportunities in the United States. The news was met with an explosion of jubilation that reverberated across the lagoon like human thunder, with entire families weeping with joy as they realized their children now possessed tangible pathways to escape the cycle of poverty that had defined previous generations. Joseph, upon learning he would be the inaugural recipient of the program, literally dropped to his knees at center court, his hands trembling as he clutched the official letter that guaranteed not only his secondary education at one of Lagos's premier private schools, but also a conditional scholarship to an American university, provided he maintained high academic standing and continued to hone his athletic prowess. "Mr. Jordan, this is a dream come true," Joseph uttered, his voice thick with emotion as the entire community erupted in applause around him. "I promise I will dedicate myself to my studies daily, train every morning, and make you proud you believed in me." Fatima, too, was awarded a full scholarship to a technical school specializing in mathematics and sciences, along with a laptop and study materials that would enable her to cultivate her extraordinary aptitudes in an academically rigorous environment. Michael watched the two children clutching their scholarship letters as if they were invaluable treasures, recalling how he himself had felt upon receiving his first basketball scholarship decades prior. "Joseph and Fatima represent merely the genesis," Michael declared to the assembled throng, his voice imbued with absolute conviction. "This program is poised to expand annually because you deserve the same opportunities as any child globally." The most poignant moment of the ceremony arrived when Michael, clad in a simple t-shirt and basketball shorts, stepped onto the court for an impromptu game with the use of Makoko, forging a surreal tableau where one of the globe's most preeminent athletes engaged in a casual basketball match with boys who had come of age amidst the stilt houses of an African lagoon. Michael had maintained an exceptional physical condition even at 62, and his court presence still emanated the same athletic authority and intuitive grasp of the game that had defined his storied career. yet now imbued with a patience and joy stemming purely from the delight of play and human connection. He imparted advanced plays to the youths that he had deployed in the NBA playoffs, demonstrated defensive techniques honed over decades of elite competition, and regaled them with anecdotes of momentous games and historical instances, all while traversing the court with the vigor of someone decades his junior. The assembled crowd watched spellbound as Michael Jordan, the very man who had conjured impossible shots before millions of viewers in arenas across the United States, now dribbled and passed with young Nigerians whose names the world would never know, yet whose aspirations he had chosen to nurture through his presence and resources. "You know," Michael remarked during a break in play, wiping sweat from his brow with a towel, "I've played before crowds of 50,000 in Chicago, but I've never felt as honored to be on a court as I do today, with all of you." Joseph, still breathing heavily but beaming radiantly, replied, "Mr. Jordan, to us, you're not famous. You're family, and family always plays together." As the sun began its descent over the lagoon, painting the sky with hues of gold and orange that mirrored themselves in the water like a liquid looking glass, the Makoko community orchestrated a farewell celebration that honored not merely Michael's departure, but the enduring transformation his presence had ushered into their lives. Hundreds of candles and oil lamps were illuminated in every dwelling across the community, forging an earthly constellation that shimmered upon the water like fallen stars, as entire families convened on their wooden verandas to partake in special meals prepared for this singular occasion. The aroma of grilled fish, rice seasoned with local spices, and tropical fruits mingled with the night breeze wafting from the lagoon, creating an atmosphere of celebration that was simultaneously festive and melancholic. Michael navigated his canoe through the illuminated water streets, visiting each family for a personal farewell, receiving blessings, embraces, small handcrafted gifts, and promises that he would forever be remembered as someone who had profoundly changed their lives for the better. Children who had grown close to him during the 6 weeks scampered across the wooden bridges, trailing his canoe, shouting farewells and vowing to study diligently and make good use of the educational materials he had provided. "Mr. Jordan," Sister Grace said, clasping his hands as he visited the floating school one last time, "you taught us that education isn't merely about books and pencils. You taught us that education is about believing our dreams matter." Michael looked around the school, which now featured proper desks, new blackboards, and a basic yet functional library, feeling a profound satisfaction that no NBA trophy had ever afforded him. "Sister Grace," he responded, his voice imbued with genuine emotion, "you taught me that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the capacity to positively impact other lives." The solemn pledge Michael made to the community during his final night in Makoko was a commitment that resonated across the lagoon like a sacred oath, establishing a legacy that would extend far beyond his temporary visit. Standing in the center of the new basketball court, illuminated by dozens of torches that cast dancing shadows on the surrounding water, Michael announced the establishment of the Makoko Jordan Foundation, a permanent organization that would provide continuous resources for education, healthcare, infrastructure development, and athletic opportunities for the community for the next 2 decades. He elaborated on how the foundation would operate. An office would be established in Lagos with local staff intimately familiar with the community's needs. Partnerships would be forged with Nigerian and American universities to create educational exchange programs, and a medical emergency fund would ensure that no one in Makoko would again face the desperate predicament that Mama Nosi had endured. "This is not charity," Michael stated with unwavering conviction, his voice imbued with the gravity of a commitment that would shape the remainder of his life. "This is an investment in the future of humanity, for you have proven to me that talent, intelligence, and kindness abound here, needing only opportunities to flourish." The multitude absorbed every word with silent reverence, comprehending that they were bearing witness to a moment that would transform not only their own lives, but the lives of their children and grandchildren. Mama Ngozi, seated in a special chair at the center of the bleachers, nodded in approval and whispered a Yoruba prayer that was echoed by dozens of voices around her. "Michael, my son," she said, extending her arms towards him, "do you promise to return to see the fruits of your seeds?" Michael knelt before her, enfolding her small yet strong hands within his own. "Mama Ngozi, I promise I will return every year for the remainder of my life. Makoko is now intrinsically woven into the fabric of who I am." The final farewell the following morning was a singular aquatic ceremony that transformed the entire lagoon into an ocean of canoes, boats, and waving individuals, in a display of collective affection that resonated more profoundly with Michael than any ovation he had ever received in packed stadiums worldwide. Hundreds of vessels of all sizes fanned out across the lagoon's surface, forming a floating mosaic of vibrant hues as men, women, children, and elders paddled in ceremonial formation to escort Michael to the point where a larger boat would transport him back to Lagos. Joseph and Fatima were in the leading canoe alongside Michael, both clad in their new school uniforms and carrying backpacks brimming with books and study materials, their faces radiating a blend of sorrow at the parting and exhilaration for the educational opportunities that awaited them. The families chanted traditional Yoruba songs that reverberated across the water like spiritual hymns, while children cast tropical flowers onto the lagoon, creating a colorful tapestry that trailed the vessels like a liquid rainbow. Michael observed this extraordinary outpouring of communal affection, with tears streaming freely down his face, finally comprehending that he had discovered something that decades of fame and success had never afforded him: a genuine family predicated on unconditional love and mutual respect. "Mr. Jordan," Joseph said, powerfully paddling, maintaining pace with the other canoes, "when you return next year, I'll be at university studying engineering, but I'll be coaching basketball every afternoon on this court," Fatima added, adjusting her new glasses as she mentally calculated the speed of their vessels. "And I'll be studying advanced mathematics, but I'll be teaching the younger children at the floating school every morning before classes." Michael smiled through his tears, realizing that his legacy in Makoko would not be measured in money spent or structures built, but in the transformed lives that would continue to impact other lives for generations. "You two are proof that investing in the right people can change the entire world," he said, observing the hundreds of people waving from the lagoon's banks. "I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying until we meet again." The last image Michael carried from Makoko was a sight that would remain etched in his memory for the rest of his life. Mama Ngozi, standing on the veranda of her wooden home, supported by Amara, yet radiating a strength and dignity that defied her advanced age, slowly waving with both hands as the entire community gathered around her in a final demonstration of unity and gratitude. The morning sun cast a golden halo around her small but imposing figure, and her final words echoed across the lagoon with a clarity that seemed to defy physical distance. "You came as Michael Jordan, but you depart as our son." The phrase was repeated in hundreds of voices, creating a chorus that accompanied Michael until he vanished from sight, carried by the lagoon's current towards the main river that would connect him back to the world he had left 6 weeks prior. Michael turned in the vessel to wave one last time, seeing the entire community still gathered on the lagoon's banks like a giant family bidding farewell to a beloved member. And he knew with absolute certainty that his life had been divided into two parts: before Makoko and after Makoko. "Amara," he said, his voice laden with an emotion that transcended words, "thank you for bringing me home. For now I know that Makoko is my true home." Amara smiled through her own tears, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder as they watched the community gradually disappear behind them. "Mr. Jordan," she replied gently, "you have always been a part of this family. You merely had to come here to discover that." Chicago's O'Hare International Airport had never witnessed a scene quite like the one awaiting Michael Jordan upon his arrival. A human ocean of journalists, television cameras, photographers' flashes, and onlookers who had transformed the terminal into a media circus of epic proportions. Hundreds of reporters from international networks thronged behind isolation ropes, all questioning where the world's most celebrated basketball figure had vanished for 6 full weeks without a single official explanation. Marcus had managed to maintain secrecy throughout this period, mechanically repeating that Mr. Jordan was in confidential business meetings in Europe, but now the press sensed blood in the water and demanded answers. When Michael emerged from the International Arrivals Concourse, the contrast with the man who had departed clandestinely 6 weeks prior was striking and immediately evident to all present. His skin was bronzed by the tropical African sun. He had shed at least 22 pounds. His eyes gleamed with a distinct intensity, not the competitive resolve everyone knew, but something deeper, more serene, more profoundly human. Dressed in simple attire and carrying merely a modest backpack, he resembled more a missionary returning from a spiritual expedition than a billionaire coming back from international business dealings. Yvette Prieto Jordan was the first to reach him, rushing through the throng with tears already streaming down her face, followed by the twins, Isabella and Victoria, who had visibly grown during his absence, and ran shouting, "Daddy! Daddy!" with a joy tempered by confusion as to his actual whereabouts. The embrace between Michael and his family was captured by dozens of television cameras and instantly broadcast live to millions worldwide. Yet all who observed could perceive that something fundamental had shifted within the man embracing his wife and daughters. "Mike, where have you been? What happened to you? You seem different," Yvette whispered into his ear, cupping his face in her hands and studying the eyes she had known for decades. "Are you all right? Are you truly all right?" Michael smiled with a tranquility she had never witnessed before, gently kissing her forehead while holding the twins in his arms. "My love, I am better than I have ever been in my entire life," he replied, his voice imbued with a quiet conviction that instantly assuaged her concerns. "And I have much to tell you all. Things that will fundamentally alter how we perceive the world and our place within it." The ensuing press conference was broadcast live to over 100 countries and would become one of the most widely viewed revelations in modern history, not for scandal or controversy, but for the sheer humanity and vulnerability Michael Jordan evinced before the entire world. Seated at a plain table in the center of the airport terminal, surrounded by microphones and cameras, yet maintaining a zen-like calm that dramatically contrasted with the media maelstrom around him, Michael began to recount a narrative that rendered even the most seasoned journalists utterly silent. "For the past 6 weeks, I have not been attending business meetings in Europe," he stated, his clear, controlled voice reverberating through loudspeakers to the assembled throng. "I was in Makoko, a floating community in Lagos, Nigeria, perched on stilts with families subsisting on less than $2 a day, learning lessons about life, community, and true wealth that Harvard Business School could never impart." The ensuing silence was deafening. Reporters who had covered Michael Jordan for decades were literally speechless. Cameras captured expressions of unadulterated shock on the faces of seasoned journalists, and the entire world paused to process that the most competitive man in sports had voluntarily chosen to reside in one of Africa's most impoverished communities. 6 weeks prior, I received a call from a woman who had cared for my children for 12 years, seeking assistance for her ailing mother. Michael continued, observing tears beginning to well up in the eyes of his own family. "I could have simply wired money. Instead, I realized I needed to go in person, and that decision transformed me irrevocably." The most poignant revelation came as Michael began to meticulously detail his life in Makoko. Speaking of children studying without books, youngsters playing basketball barefoot on wooden planks, and families discovering genuine joy despite living in circumstances most Americans would deem insurmountable. "I've secured 6 NBA titles, garnered 5 MVP awards, been inducted into the Hall of Fame, and built a billion-dollar business empire," Michael stated, his voice gaining emotional gravitas with each word. "But in Makoko, I learned what true victory entails. Victory is an 8-year-old child walking 2 hours to reach school because they believe education will transform their life. Victory is a mother toiling 16 hours a day to ensure her children are fed. Victory is an entire community convening to aid a stranger because it's simply the right thing to do." Tears now streamed uninhibitedly down Michael's face, and television cameras captured every moment of this unprecedented vulnerability from a man who had forged his reputation on unwavering emotional fortitude. "I discovered that true greatness lies not in the accolades we accrue, but in the lives we impact. In Makoko, it wasn't I who helped. They saved me. The phrase resonated throughout the terminal like a powerful mantra, instantly reiterated by news anchors and shared globally across social media platforms. The announcements Michael made during the press conference not only revolutionized his own life, but also generated ripples that would propagate through the realms of sports, business, and philanthropy for decades to come. First, he unveiled the establishment of the Jordan Africa Foundation, an organization boasting an initial endowment of $500 million, specifically dedicated to education, healthcare, and economic development within West African aquatic communities. This is not traditional charity, Michael explained, displaying official documents that had been prepared during his return flight. It is a long-term investment in human potential that is currently being squandered due to a dearth of fundamental opportunities. We will establish schools, health clinics, scholarship programs, and microcredit systems that will empower these communities to foster sustainable development. Second, he announced the Hoops for the Future program, an initiative slated to construct 1,000 community basketball courts across Africa over the next 5 years, each complemented by educational curricula, scholarship avenues, and athletic training designed to shepherd young Africans toward American universities. Basketball is a universal language, Michael stated, smiling for the first time during the press conference. Through this sport, we can impart leadership, teamwork, discipline, and unlock pathways to higher education that will transform not only individual lives, but entire communities. The partnership with Nike proved revolutionary. Effective immediately, 100% of the profits from the Air Jordan Africa line will be channeled directly to these communities, he disclosed, sending shockwaves through the industry. Nike will manufacture footwear specifically engineered for African conditions. Water-resistant, exceptionally durable, and affordably priced. Every pair sold will underwrite school supplies, medical equipment, and athletic programs. The attending Nike executive corroborated this as the company's most substantial philanthropic endeavor, signifying hundreds of millions in African development. His most profound commitment, however, was personal. I will dedicate 4 months of each year to residing within these communities for the next 2 decades, he declared, astonishing even his own family. Not as a visitor, but as an integral member of the community, working side by side, teaching basketball, and constantly learning. Yvette listened with a mixture of pride and trepidation, understanding that their lives had been irrevocably altered. My family understands that this is no temporary endeavor, he continued, holding her hand. This is who I have become, and I am profoundly grateful for their support on this journey, which will undoubtedly be the most significant work of my life. The culmination of his address produced one of the most iconic images of Michael's career. A colossal photograph projected behind him, depicting his embrace with children from Makoko on the newly constructed court. The image perfectly encapsulated his transformation. A man who had attained material success beyond measure, now finding deeper fulfillment in elevating others. This photograph represents my greatest source of pride, he stated, turning toward the image. Not because I accomplished anything extraordinary, but because these children showed me what truly matters. They taught me that true heroes don't win championships. They are those who leverage their influence to offer hope to the forgotten. As he rose to depart the podium, he was met with a spontaneous ovation that began with his family and rippled through the entire audience. Journalists, staff, and passengers watching the broadcast. It was an ovation unlike any he had received before, not for athletic prowess, but for the courage to display vulnerability and a profound commitment to something greater than himself. Michael waved, tears welling in his eyes, knowing that his life had been irrevocably cleaved. The man before Makoko, and the one who had discovered that true victory lay in uplifting others rather than solely oneself. If the journey of Michael Jordan and Amara Okafor has resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and discover the next compelling story we prepared for you. Until next time. And before you go, comment below where you're watching from and tell me, what did you think of the conclusion of this story?